So let me go ahead and explain my basic situation. Now this is actually a pretty long story, so it's going to actually be several videos that tell what my situation is, the history of it. For right now, I'm just going to tell you the most important details. On June 5th, 2012, I was at work and I sat in an office chair. I leaned all the way back. It broke under my weight and I fell straight to the ground, hit my head on a filing cabinet. Now I didn't lose consciousness. Funny enough, I wasn't taken in an ambulance, more on that later. But the doctors ruled that I had a concussion and had me stay home. I was back to work within a week because I felt good. But I wish I didn't do that. I wish I would take more time off. Doctors didn't care. The long short of it is I stayed in work for about a month and a half. And then I left work and I went on to short-term disability. I was on short-term disability for about 5 months and it ran out. I finally found a doctor that could help me, a neurologist. Now I'd seen many doctors up until this point, all of them giving me different answers and none of them really helping me the way I needed to. But unfortunately, because I didn't have short-term disability to fall back on anymore, I chose to go back to work. But of course, I needed the specialist to sign off on it. He was more than eager to do so. So I went back to work, starting at part-time. I will mention here that what I didn't know going back to work part-time was that I lost my benefits. I lost my insurance. I lost a lot of things, but they didn't tell me this. Also, they didn't tell me that if I missed work for any reason, I had to have a doctor's note to come back if related to my condition. I'll explain more of that in the future videos. Now, I was at work for about 5 months. I started at 20 hours a week and then went up to 30 hours a week in February. December 2012 was when I went back to work. And then February of 2013, I went to 30 hours just so I could get my benefits back. With my company, doing 30 hours of work a week would make me eligible for benefits, so I decided to take that. And then I had the doctor in April of 2013 put me back at 40 hours. Now during this time I was also on a medication. And at first the medication seemed to help, but then it kind of lost its effect on me and it started being like it didn't exist. Now here's where my story begins, my current one. In April of 2013, I called up my insurance company, Metlife, and I told them that I was more than likely going to stop working because I was starting to reach a breaking point where I couldn't go into work anymore. I really did not want to do short-term disability given the troubles I had with it before. So I asked Metlife, is there a way that I can just do long-term disability instead? I didn't know, and I figured I had a pretty good shot of yes. Now they told me that because I did not complete the paperwork they sent out in December of 2012, I would have to start the process all over again. This April 30th was the last day of work, and then after that I couldn't go back. Now, unfortunately, my primary care physician that was treating me before retired that week, so I had to find a new doctor. And it took me a little bit of time. I don't just go and find the next random doctor I can. I did my homework and I found a doctor that I believed could help me. And sure enough, he did understand my situation and he did make that recommendation that I shouldn't be working, but before he filled out any paperwork from Metlife, he required my medical files. I saw him a few weeks later. He read through all over it. And, like my previous primary care physician, he told me that this was going to be a long, hard road to follow. And even though I should be on disability, doesn't mean that I'll get on it right away. And it may just take a little bit of time to do. And I'm okay with that. I understand that going in. Again, I'd rather not be on disability. I'd rather be working again. But I can't. I can't really do anything. And I can push myself to do stuff, but even then, that's just a little complicated. Now, there was some paperwork that I needed the doctor to fill out. 2 paperworks from Metlife and 1 from my employer for American Disabilities Act. Now, I'd actually talked to the people at ADA through my company and told them that there would be a delay in getting the paperwork, and they gave me an extension, June 7th. And I saw the doctor at the end of May, so there was plenty of time. I filled out a set of paperwork with the doctor. I believe it was the ADA paperwork. And then I told him, and then he's like, well, I'll fill out the rest of the paperwork, and then we'll go ahead and get all of this faxed over to them. And it had instructions on there how to fax it. Well, I waited about a week, and I called Metlife to check with them if they'd gotten the paperwork, and they didn't. I called the doctor's office, and they're like, oh, yeah, well, the doctor put it in our inbox. Well, actually what they said at first was, oh, well, the doctor had some additional questions that he needed to ask you about that. I'm like, why didn't you call me to let me know this sooner? It's like, oh, well, he put it in my inbox. I didn't know what it was for. So, oh, man. Oh, God. Oh. Normally I would just cut this, but I want people to see this. Alright, so... So, I talked to them, that got the questions answered, and they sent the paperwork. And I got confirmation from MetLife that they received them. Well, a couple of weeks went by, and I got a call from my employer. And they said, well, we didn't receive, well, you're fired. I'm like, what? Like, yes, we're letting you go. We didn't receive the paperwork for the ADA. So I asked them, well, the doctors do have the paperwork. If I go ahead and just fax it now, can we reverse this? And they're like, no, once a decision has been made, that's final. So I talked to the doctor's office. Had no idea what I was talking about. They only found 2 packets of information, but I know I gave the doctor 3 packets of information. And I'm like, well, you have it. I mean, it's there somewhere. And they pled ignorance. So I decided to drive down to the doctor's office. And I looked through my medical file, and I found it. It was misfiled in the file. And they're like, oh, well, we didn't know that we needed to fax this. And I said to them, well, because of this, I've lost my job. I needed this paperwork faxed in. I have now lost my job. Their response to this was, we'll just have them call us and we'll answer any questions for them. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. They don't care anymore. They fired me because you didn't send in this paperwork. Now, I would have sent in the paperwork myself, but I didn't really have a fax machine, nor did I have the money to go to Kinko's to fax it. And it was several pages long. So, that was just what they said. Well, have them call us back and we will answer any questions they have. And that was the only answer I could get from them. Now, the other part about this story, my current situation, well, Metlife received the paperwork, and I was going to continue with them on trying to get short-term disability. And the end of June comes along, and basically, well, no, I think it was the middle of July. I don't remember specific dates right now. But sometime the end of June, beginning of July, I get a call, and I've been in constant contact with Metlife, trying to figure out what's going on, what's the situation, are you going to deny me? At first they actually did deny me, because somehow the doctor didn't fill out the information correctly, so they decided to deny me, but they were going to look into it again and see if there's something more that they could do. So I got a call from long-term disability. They didn't know why they were calling me. They were just like, well, we were told to call you. And I'm like, okay, did they say why? It's like, well, if you had any questions for long-term disability. I figured this was a courtesy call to make sure that I understood how everything worked. And having dealt with this many times, well, having dealt with this in the past, I kind of had an idea of how the procedure to getting long-term disability worked. So I let them go. And then a few days later I call in and I find out that my case was denied. I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, it's going to long-term disability now. I'm like, what? So I left a message for my caseworker, like, what's going on here? I was under the impression I'm getting short-term disability, that I wasn't eligible for long-term disability. Turns out I was supposed to be doing long-term disability all along. Now remember, April 2013, near the end of the month, I called long-term disability and asked specifically if I could do long-term disability, and they told me no. And I was furious. So I talked to a supervisor for long-term disability, and I just let her have it. Usually I'm very patient over the phone dealing with customer support, because that's what I do, is customer support and technical support. And I know for the most part it's not the person on the phone's fault. Even the supervisor, it's not their fault. But I really let them have it, because I was just pissed off. Because, mind you, I've wasted like 2 months of my life dealing with this. And I'm flat broke. I didn't have money. I was about to lose my apartment. My phone got turned off, so I was actually using internet phone, Google Voice. And it was just so angry, so frustrated with all of it. Well, they said that most likely the reason why I got told that in April is that I did not tell the person on the phone that I went back to work part-time. Apparently I have to be working for 180 days full-time in order to no longer be eligible for long-term disability. Not something that was told to me over the phone. Had they said that, I would have been like, oh yeah, well, I was part-time. And I was asking if there was a way I could do it. I honestly feel, having done customer support in the past, or for most of my career, that they should have asked that question. But their excuse was, I didn't tell them. I didn't come out and say, oh, by the way, when I went back to work, it was for part-time. All I said is, I went back to work. I didn't know that I needed to be specific with them. And they said, well, yeah, you just need to do long-term disability. I'm like, well, look, I can't go see a specialist to get the doctor to sign off on this paperwork. Because with long-term disability, they really need a specialist to specifically state they believe you should be off of work. and because I lost my job means I no longer have insurance. The other bomb that they kind of dropped on me was that apparently when I went back to work part-time, I could have still pursued long-term disability. While I couldn't work, I mean, the difference between being able to live in my apartment and pay my bills while pursuing long-term disability, I would have found a way to make it work, even if I was working 20 hours a week. Even if I still lost my apartment, it still would have been good because now I'm living with my mother again. And it really hurts me deep that I lost my apartment because it took me 5 years to get my own place. And I finally got my own place and I had to give it up. I had to break the lease on it, which is only going to hurt me if I ever try to get a lease again. So this is my current situation. Now, what I would like to do is I would like to bring a lawsuit against Metlife for giving me the wrong information and causing me to go into a financial hardship, which they didn't care about. They didn't care that, oh, well, it's both of our fault. You didn't tell us what we needed to know, and we didn't tell you what you needed to know. And I call BS on that one. Because just because I didn't give them I gave them the information they wanted over the phone. If they needed some more information, they should have asked for it, because I don't know what they needed to know. Plus, their big favorite saying is, oh, well, we sent you a pamphlet in the mail that explained everything. Yeah, you did that like last year. You're also dealing with someone who has memory issues. It's not like I can just recall things on a whim. I find that anything that happened before the accident, I have a better chance of remembering. Anything after the accident becomes difficult. And the longer of a time has passed since it happened, I don't remember it. I don't know if I have a case against Metlife, in all honesty. I probably don't. But I would like to bring one against the doctor. Because when I found out from Metlife that I could return back to work, if I still had a job, I could have returned, even if it was for 20 hours a week. It would have been something. It would have been a way to get some money together. So I could get doctor appointments and I could still pursue things, or even for 30 hours and have my insurance, So I think that they're liable because I told them that they needed to fax that paperwork in by a certain date and they misfiled it. Now, I've tried talking to a number of lawyers, and the lawyers have... I haven't really gotten too far with that. I've talked to probably 20 different law firms. First off, I'm told that this is not medical malpractice because it was related to my employment. This is now employment law. I'm not really sure which one it is. I'm more leaning to medical malpractice, that they failed to do their duty as a medical professional versus employment law, even though I got fired because of their negligence. But I can't find a lawyer to take my case. No one's directly refused my case. Well, I think one person did, and they even sent me a letter stating that as well. It's like, oh, well, that's nice of you. But most of them, well, all of them want money up front for a consultation. I even talked to the ones that supposedly had free consultations, but I later learned that free consultation only applies to certain types of cases. So for my case, nope, they want $100, $150, I think one even said $200 consultation fee for an hour. And of course that means that I pay, and then they decide of whether or not they want to take the case. And I have no problem coming up with that kind of money, but I do have an issue with giving money to someone for them to tell me, no, we won't take your case, ha ha ha, we have your money. we're not giving it back. So I would want a little more of a guarantee that someone would actually take my case to provide any sort of money up front. But then I don't have any income coming in. So I've tried talking to lawyers. I've tried calling the Arizona Bar Association. And because a lot of lawyers kept telling me, well, contact them and they'll get you in touch with a lawyer that can take your case pro bono. They said that they don't do that. However, they gave me some agencies that could help me pro bono. And I don't even necessarily need pro bono. I'm willing to take that whatever winnings I receive, that they take a percentage of that. But the programs that they gave me basically are not for my case type. They're for a lot of other things. So any other services they offered require money up front. Even if it's for a cheap amount, I don't have money. And it's not something I can just ask my parents for money, saying, hey, maybe they'll take my case. I mean, I don't even want to do that unless I'm sure there's some sort of guarantee that it's like, you know what, we'll take your case, but we still need to do a consultation. I don't know. I will touch on one point. When I first found out about the long-term disability, they apparently sent some paperwork to my doctor, and my doctor called and said that I needed to get in for an appointment so they could fill out the paperwork. I also needed them to fax in all of my medical files to Metlife. And I talked to the doctor, and they're like, well, I told them I don't have insurance because I lost my job. And they're like, well, it's going to cost you like $90 just to come see us. And I'm like, my mom said she'd cover it. So I talked to them, and they're like, okay, well, let's do this date. And I'm like, okay, fine. And it's taken me a lot of effort to continue. So they tried to schedule an appointment and found that I still owed them money for previous doctor's visits, which I thought I didn't have a copay, but apparently I did, even though it wasn't listed on the card. But they also charged me an extra $150. So I had to pay like $300 plus the $90 for the office visit. That $150 was for the fact that I had them fill out 3 forms that was longer than a couple of pages each. A charge that I wasn't aware of when I went to go see them. And I spoke to, I guess, the office manager, and they're like, well, yeah, you have to pay this in order for you to come in. And I'm like, well, it's kind of unfair that you're charging me $50 for at least one of those forms when I lost my job because you didn't send that paperwork in. And they're like, okay, well, here, we'll tell you what, we'll take off $25 for that form. And I'm like, oh yeah, because, a difference of $350 and $325 is what was holding me back from coming in and seeing you. I exactly have $325. I didn't say that, but I wanted to. But, I explained to them, and it took me a while to really get it through to them. It's like, I have no income coming in. I lost my job. Now, I wouldn't pursue a lawsuit if they would accept their responsibility of saying, you know what, because of us, you lost your job. So what we're going to do is we're going to help you get on long-term disability. And for right now, we'll let you run a tab and we'll get you the medical attention you need. And once you get on long-term disability, then we can set up a payment schedule for you to pay it back. If they had at least tried to work with me and say, actually acknowledge that I'm in a financial hardship and it's partly their fault, then I wouldn't want to pursue a lawsuit against them. I'm not into frivolous lawsuits, but they're responsible for it and I have no income coming in. And that's my basic situation. So at this time, I just need help in knowing what to do next.